I don't think they were looking at me as being a paragon of virtue. I think they thought it was kind of funny for somebody with as checkered a history as I have to be giving advice at all. And I think it's funny too. And if you don't like it, I think you should go out and have a beer.
David Crosby was more than a legendary musician. His personal life was as complex and influential as his career. While known for his role in The Byrds and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, his family life was equally compelling. Crosby fathered several children, each with a unique story. Some were raised apart from him, while others had a more direct relationship. His son, James Raymond, was placed for adoption and later reunited with him. He also played a role in Melissa Etheridge's family as a sperm donor for her 2 children. More recently, his son, David Caleb Crosby, made headlines due to his involvement in the January 6th insurrection. David Crosby's early life and musical career. David Crosby's influence on music began long before he became a father. Born in Los Angeles in 1941, he was drawn to music early on. His breakthrough came in the 1960s as a founding member of the Byrds, where his harmonies and songwriting helped shape folk rock. He later formed Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and their debut album became an instant classic. With the addition of Neil Young, the group evolved into Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, one of the most iconic acts of the era. Crosby's music was deeply personal, often reflecting his life experiences.
So when the idea of smoking a joint, came along, we thought, wow, this is pretty wonderful. And we embraced it. We thought, wow, this is going to give us all kinds of wild new ideas. And maybe it did, maybe it didn't, maybe the ideas would have come anyway, but we loved it.
He struggled with drug addiction for years, which led to legal troubles and time in prison. Despite these setbacks, he remained an influential figure in music, releasing solo work and collaborating with artists across generations. His career was marked by reinvention, but his relationships, especially with his children, were often complicated. He admitted in later years that he had not been the best father, saying, quote, "I have screwed up massively. I am learning as fast as I can and trying real hard to be a decent guy." James Raymond. In 1962, before his rise to fame, David Crosby fathered a son with his girlfriend, Celia Crawford Ferguson. At the time, neither of them felt prepared to raise a child, leading them to place him for adoption. The baby, named James Raymond by his adoptive parents, grew up without any knowledge of his biological father's identity. Crosby later reflected on the decision. "I was just an irresponsible young guy," he admitted. "I never expected to see him again." James was raised by a loving family and showed an early talent for music. He became a skilled pianist, composer, and producer, making a name for himself in the industry long before he learned who his biological father was. At 30 years old, after searching for his birth parents, he discovered he was the son of David Crosby. When they finally met, both were struck by how much they had in common.
It's been pretty amazing. James is hitting his stride as a writer at a level that I can't really even believe how good he is. When he found out that I was his father, he'd already been a musician for 20 years. So it went click. Oh, I get it now.
The reunion quickly turned into a musical partnership. James and David formed a band called CPR, along with guitarist Jeff Pevar. The group released several albums and toured together, creating a deep bond between father and son. James later worked as a producer and composer for other artists, including his father. Despite spending decades apart, their relationship became one of the most significant in Crosby's later years. Melissa Etheridge and David Crosby. In the late 90s, Melissa Etheridge and her then partner Julie Cypher wanted to start a family. They sought a known sperm donor rather than an anonymous one, hoping their children would have a connection to their biological father. David Crosby, a longtime friend of the couple, agreed to help. Etheridge later explained the decision, saying, quote, "We wanted to choose someone who would be in our lives, who could be a friend to the children." Crosby was an unconventional but fitting choice, given his musical legacy and close friendship with the pair. Their children, Bailey and Beckett Cypher, were raised by Etheridge and Cypher, with Crosby playing more of a benevolent uncle role. While he wasn't a daily presence, he remained in their lives and was open about his biological connection. "They are their parents' children," Crosby said. "I'm just the genetic material." Tragedy struck in 2020 when Beckett died from complications related to opioid addiction at the age of 21. Etheridge spoke publicly about her grief, emphasizing that addiction had taken her son's life.
An Arizona man behind bars accused of assaulting officers during the January 6, 2021 riots at the U.S. Capitol. The FBI arresting 35-year-old David Caleb Crosby Tuesday after he surrendered.
David Caleb Crosby. Among David Crosby's children, one of the most controversial to emerge was his son, David Caleb Crosby. Unlike James Raymond, who built a career in music, or Bailey and Beckett, who were raised by Melissa Etheridge, David Caleb's life took a different path. He largely remained out of the public eye until his involvement in the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, bringing him into national headlines. He was arrested and charged for his participation in the riots, facing multiple counts related to trespassing and disorderly conduct. Court documents detailed his presence inside the Capitol building, and prosecutors argued that he had actively contributed to the chaos that unfolded that day. His case became part of the broader legal actions taken against hundreds of individuals who stormed the Capitol in support of then-President Donald Trump. David Caleb received a full pardon from Trump, part of a wave of clemencies granted to January 6 defendants. With the charges dropped, he avoided prison time, but his actions remained a point of controversy. His father, known for his outspoken political views, never publicly commented on his son's involvement in the riots. Given Crosby's long history of activism and his alignment with left-leaning politics, it's unclear what kind of relationship he had with David Caleb in later years. The stark contrast between their political beliefs and public personas only added to the complexity of Crosby's legacy as a father. Other children and family dynamics. David Crosby has other children who remained largely out of the spotlight. One of them was Erica Keller Crosby, born from his relationship with Jackie Guthrie. Erica led a private life, choosing to stay away from public attention. Very little is known about her relationship with Crosby, but she was reportedly raised outside of his direct involvement. Another daughter, Donovan Crosby, was born from a different relationship. Like Erica, she kept her life private, and little information about her upbringing or connection to Crosby is available. While he acknowledged his various children in interviews, he rarely spoke about Donovan, leading many to assume they did not share a close bond. Crosby's youngest son, Django Crosby, was born to him and his longtime wife, Jan Dance. Django was the only child Crosby raised in a traditional family setting, and by all accounts, they had a strong relationship. In later years, Crosby frequently spoke about Django with affection, often describing him as a source of stability. "Django keeps me laughing," he once said. "He's my best friend." Django was by Crosby's side in his final years, living with him and Jan in California. Unlike his half-siblings, he was present for the everyday aspects of Crosby's life, making their father-son bond one of the most enduring in Crosby's complicated family history. David's reflections on fatherhood. David Crosby never shied away from admitting his flaws, particularly when it came to being a father. His struggles with addiction, arrests, and years prioritizing his career over personal relationships often put distance between him and his children. In interviews, he spoke openly about his regrets and the missed opportunities he wished he could change. Quote, "I was not a great dad. I was absent for a lot of it, and that's just the truth." Despite this, Crosby made efforts to reconnect with some of his children later in life. His relationship with James Raymond was a testament to that, as they not only formed a bond, but also worked together musically. Crosby viewed their collaboration as a gift, often saying that discovering James was one of the greatest things to happen to him. His role in Melissa Etheridge's family was more complicated. He was never a father in the traditional sense, but he still felt connected to Bailey and Beckett. When Beckett died, Crosby expressed sadness, but was careful to acknowledge that he had not raised him. With Django, Crosby had the chance to be a more present father. In later years, he relied on his youngest son for support and companionship. "Django saved my life more than once," he said. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your fondest memory of David Crosby? Let us know in the comments section below.